In a quiet town like Stoughton, Wisconsin, some stories feel like they've been around forever, woven right into the landscape. So, when you hear whispers of the phantom locomotive, a ghost train, it's easy to get hooked. The tale usually starts the same. A ghostly light appears on the tracks, the air grows cold, and a spectral train from a bygone era thunders past before vanishing into thin air. They say it's the echo of a terrible crash that shook the town to its core. But is that story true? Or is it just a bit of local folklore, a campfire tale? We decided to dig into the history and mystery of the Stoughton Ghost Train to see if we could find the truth haunting these rails. If you enjoy unraveling local legends and historical mysteries, make sure you subscribe, because we've got a lot more ground to cover. The idea of a ghost train is classic American folklore, and for good reason. It has all the right ingredients for a story that sticks around. The eyewitness is almost always a friend of a friend, and the details are wonderfully chilling. It starts with a distant rumble on a quiet night, on a stretch of track you thought was abandoned. The sound grows into the unmistakable chug of an old-fashioned steam engine. Then, a single piercing headlight cuts through the dark. As this spectral engine gets closer, witnesses say there's no sound of wheels on steel, just the ghostly hiss of steam and the mournful cry of its whistle. Some people claim the air turns ice cold as it passes. Others swear they've seen ethereal figures in the windows of phantom passenger cars, their faces pale and lost. And just as suddenly as it appears, the whole thing vanishes, leaving nothing but silence and a feeling that you just saw something you shouldn't have. These legends are almost always born from some forgotten tragedy: a devastating derailment, a collision in a blizzard, or a rail worker who met a grisly end. The stories get whispered in diners and around campfires, passed down until the line between fact and folklore is hopelessly blurred. We thought the Stoughton Ghost Train was one of these echoes, a spectral replay of a tragedy. So our investigation started with one question: what was the tragedy? We dove into archives and old newspapers, searching for the crash, the disaster that would give birth to such a powerful ghost story. But we found nothing. To understand where a ghost train story comes from, you have to get how deeply railroads are stitched into the American identity. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, the railway was the nation's lifeblood. It connected isolated towns, carried people toward new futures, and fueled the engine of industry. For a town like Stoughton, the arrival of the railroad in 1853 was a game changer, transforming it from a small settlement into a bustling hub. But all that progress came with a price. Early rail travel was dangerous. Boilers exploded, wooden bridges collapsed, and head-on collisions were terrifyingly common. It felt like every mile of track was paid for with a story of hardship and, too often, loss. And where there's great tragedy, ghost stories are sure to follow. American folklore is packed with phantom trains. The most famous might be the Lincoln funeral train. They say that every April, on the anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's death, a spectral train retraces the original 1,700-mile funeral route. Clocks stop, watches freeze, and a phantom locomotive draped in black pulls a single, solemn casket car through the night. A whole nation's grief given ghostly form. Often, these legends come from very real, very horrific events. In 1910, in the remote Cascade Mountains of Washington, 2 trains were stranded by a blizzard. An avalanche swept them off the mountain and into a ravine, killing nearly 100 people. It's still one of the deadliest rail disasters in American history, and people still talk about strange lights and ghostly whistles on that lonely stretch of track. These stories are like memorials, making sure the victims aren't forgotten. So when we looked into the Stoughton legend, we expected to find a similar anchor in history. We searched for a big crash, a lost crew, a forgotten calamity, but the historical record was silent. There was no great Stoughton train disaster. The town has a rich railroad history, and its beautiful 1913 depot is still standing, but the tragedy that supposedly haunts its tracks just wasn't there. We'd hit a brick wall, or so we thought. It turns out, we might have been looking for the wrong kind of ghost entirely. Just when we thought we were out of leads, our search took a wild turn. We broadened our scope from Stoughton to the folklore of Wisconsin as a whole. And that's when we found another ghost train, one that's surprisingly well documented, but not in the way you'd think. And this is where the story gets really interesting. About an hour north of Stoughton, in the Milwaukee suburb of Shorewood, a ghost train appears every single night. But this isn't a spirit, it's an incredible work of public art. It's called the Shorewood Ghost Train, and it is a breathtaking tribute to Wisconsin's railway past. Created by artist Marty Peck, the installation uses light and sound to create an illusion so real it's uncanny. As dusk settles, you hear a crossing bell, followed by the deep, resonant horn of a locomotive. Then, a series of lights mounted on an old trail bridge light up in sequence, perfectly simulating the shape and speed of a passing train. Fog machines pump out spectral steam, and the sounds of the engine fade, just like a real train disappearing into the night. And this isn't just any old train it's recreating. It's a memorial to a specific legendary locomotive, the Twin Cities 400. From 1935 to 1963, the 400 was the crown jewel of the Chicago and Northwestern Railway. It got its name by promising to travel the 400 miles between Chicago and the Twin Cities in 400 minutes. An absolutely stunning feat of speed and engineering at the time. When it debuted in 1935, Time magazine called it the fastest train scheduled on the American continent. The 400 wasn't just a machine, it was a thundering symbol of progress and luxury. The Shorewood art installation is so effective, so hauntingly real, that people gather just to watch it run. The experience is powerful, and it sticks with you. And here's our theory. This is the key to the Stoughton legend. In the age of social media, stories travel fast and get twisted along the way. A video of the Shorewood ghost train, shared without context, could easily be mistaken for something else. Someone sees this amazing illusion, hears it's in Wisconsin, and mistakenly pins it to their own local town with a proud railroad history, a town just like Stoughton. So maybe the Ghost Train of Stoughton isn't a century-old haunting. Maybe it's a modern myth, an urban legend born from digital confusion. Maybe there was no crash, no spectral echo of a tragedy. The ghost train people might be whispering about is actually an echo of a brilliant piece of art, its story retold and relocated until it took on a life of its own. To really get a feel for this story, I came here to Stoughton to walk the very ground where this legend is supposed to live. Standing beside the old tracks near the historic depot, you can feel the history all around you. These rails are part of the town's story. They carried wagons from the famous local factories, transported soldiers, and connected generations. Wisconsin has a deep appreciation for this heritage. It was the first state to start converting abandoned railway lines into public trails, beginning with the Elroy-Sparta Trail back in 1967. Today, these rails-to-trails projects crisscross the state, letting you walk or bike through history. Standing here at dusk, as the sky darkens, it's easy to let your imagination get the best of you. The wind whistling through an old signal post could sound like a distant horn. The rustle of leaves could be the chug of an engine. The power of suggestion is strong. If you've heard a story about a ghost train, your mind will start looking for it in the shadows. So I set up my gear, let the recorders rung as night fell, and asked the classic questions. Is anyone here? Can you tell us your story? But the only replies were the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of the highway. No phantom lights, no ghostly whistles. The tracks stayed silent and empty. The ghost, it seems, wasn't here. It was an hour north, being projected in light and sound, a spectacular illusion mistaken for a spirit. So, is the Ghost Train of Stoughton real? Our investigation suggests the answer is no, at least not in the way we usually think of ghosts. It seems the legend doesn't come from a historical tragedy or a restless spirit, but from a modern-day mix-up, a fascinating case of mistaken identity between a powerful work of art and a town proud of its railroad history. But in a way, the story is still true. The ghost haunting these tracks isn't a crash victim. It's the ghost of the railroad itself, the lingering memory of a time when magnificent trains like the Twin Cities 400 were kings. That memory is so powerful that it inspires art that can fool our eyes and create legends that take root in new places. The real story here isn't about a haunting, but about how history haunts us in our stories, our art, and our imagination. The ghost of the American Railroad, it turns out, continues to ride the rails of our collective memory. What do you think? Is this a simple case of mistaken identity, or could there be more to the story? Let me know in the comments, and please share any local legends from your hometown. I'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching.